So now we move to Edward Baldwin, who's going to be talking about fluoride, naturally occurring substance, scheduled poison, and I'm now adding, as he will explain, food or food supplement or medicine. And I've known Edward and his interest in this topic for some time now. We come with rather different motivations for being interested in the topic, but in all of the time that I've been interested in it, I have never come across anyone more meticulous than Edward in assessing evidence, and it's very nice that you've been able to come and talk about this. Edward, over to you.
Thank you. Set my own little timer. Well, first, thank you very much for asking me to come. I'm extremely grateful, and particularly grateful to Vivian for finding this antiquated machine somewhere in the bowels of the place, which could take my overheads. We better get rid of those ones, hadn't we? Fluoridation is a surprisingly big subject, the fluoridation of water. And I was in two minds whether to try and deal with one or two of the issues that arise from it in some depth. No.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks very much. Or whether to throw the lot at you and all the issues that came up. I've decided to do the latter, and it's partly because there is a big debate to be had in public policy, and we're just not having it. And I want people to be aware of some of the ramifications there are that people either haven't thought of or have put under the carpet, so to speak. What I'm going to do is just briefly have a word. Not everybody knows what fluoridation actually is, so just to say the where, what, why of that. Then talk about my own involvement, which started on the political arena. That leads on easily to the scientific evidence, and that's where our German comes in there. Particularly interesting is how the evidence was then regarded by the various factions of people once it came out in the public domain. Other questions around evidence that aren't generally addressed but are important I want to look at too, and the very unusual nature, I believe, of the whole business as a medical intervention, and the issues that gives rise to. Then we come to the categories that Ian has mentioned of how do you classify it. Is it a medical intervention as such? Is it a food? What is it? And if we've time at the end, two major non-scientific factors, the ethics, which concerns a great number of people, including me. We may not have a lot of time for that, and I also want to say a little bit about the social science of it, and one particularly good writer on that topic who looks at issues such as who has the power in this business, and is it a matter of values just as much as the science. So quickly going at what is fluoridation. It is the adding of a substance, compound of fluoride, to produce a concentration of 1 part per million in the public water supply, which you get, all of you in an area, if it's fluoridated, through your taps. You can't avoid it. Standard filters don't get rid of it. You can in a very complicated way, but then you'll get it from your restaurant next door. Why? Because in America, pre-war, that's Hitler's war, they thought they saw, and possibly they did, that people who lived in high fluoride levels in the water, and it's natural in all waters at some concentration, mostly lower than that, people's teeth appeared to be better, though they did appear to be somewhat discoloured. So the reason is to target children's teeth at their developing stage, to strengthen them so that they're resistant to decay, and that's what the Americans thought they'd found. And in 1950 they began promoting it after some rudimentary trials very vigorously, both in their own country, the US Public Health Service, American Dental Association, and abroad, mostly in the English-speaking world, to which they had easy access. And that's where it's largely stayed. There are some other countries, but broadly it's a feature of the English-speaking world. And America is about 2/3 fluoridated. Australia something like the same. Canada slightly less. Ireland, Republic of Ireland, is very high. The only two places I know that are 100% are Hong Kong and Singapore. In this country, about 5 million people are subject to it, and that's why I think it's an important health measure. That's quite a lot of people, even if it's only about 9% of the UK have the artificial fluoride added to it. And how it's done is by decisions of local communities, mostly around about the world where it happens, deciding whether to fluoridate the community on behalf of everybody or not. The laws recently changed in this country, and whereas the water companies used to have a veto, which they exercised as soon as anyone got interested in fluoridation because they didn't want to be the one to be sued if anything went wrong. And the government took that away by a Water Act in 2003 and said, not, as we were assured, that it would be a decision of the local elected democratic authorities, but that it should be a decision of the strategic health authorities. But they did assure us that it would not go ahead without full consultation and the majority agreement of the people concerned. And that has gone by the board, as we may or may not have time to say later. So it's in the hands of the SHAs, put up to it by a PCT. My involvement in this began, well, it really began about 20 years ago. I'm a breed of sort of dinosaur, hereditary crossbench peer in the House of Lords. Took my seat in 1988 and was always interested. I was interested in a lot of the things that our previous speaker was talking about, environmental factors on health, and this was one of them. When things hotted up and the Labour government geared themselves to for the great cull of the hereditary peers, I saw there was very little time left, and instead of dabbling in a bit here and there, asking questions or having debates or speaking, I thought it's time to have a real push on something. I picked fluoridation because I had a lot of material in other files as well, but it seemed to me to have a lot of concrete things to work on. I mean, one I was interested in, another dental one, funnily enough, was mercury in people's teeth, but there's so little actual evidence and research been done on that after you've said a few things, the thing would die. And fluoridation I thought would possibly run, and boy has it run. For that reason too, because to have something concrete to deal with the Department of Health, I went for the science of fluoride and left the ethics on one side because I didn't think it was productive. Certainly if everyone raised it at question time, there'd be a cross-current of passionate people in all directions going miles off the subject. This always happens there. So I went for the science, believing it was probably not as good as it was promoted, but genuinely not knowing. And at that point, I was very lucky to run into Ian in Oxford in about 1998, who listened and said, yes, he said, I think you're probably wrong on the merits, but you're certainly right that the government hasn't displayed its wares. There's no transparency here. We need to know how they've come to the support that they have for fluoridation. What you need to ask for is a systematic scientific review. I remember saying, what's that? And I remember you telling me what it was. And from that moment on, I went on a steep learning curve as a non-trained scientist.